I skipped my hospital shift that morning to bring my mother clean clothes, knowing it meant a written warning on my record. At the front desk of the care facility, the receptionist smiled and said visiting hours were over, even though the clock said 9:12 a.m. She slid a clipboard toward me and pointed to a name that wasn't mine. My mother's bracelet had her last name spelled wrong. That was the moment I realized the paperwork mattered more than love, and everything I trusted was already being erased. I skipped my hospital shift that morning to bring my mother clean clothes, knowing exactly what it would cost me: a written warning. Another black mark in a file that was already too thick for someone who worked in palliative care. I told myself it was temporary. One day without pay. One supervisor shaking her head. None of that mattered as much as making sure my mother had her blue cardigan, the soft one she liked to wear when the air conditioning ran too cold. It was 9:12 a.m. when I pushed through the glass doors of the care facility in North Seattle. I remember the time because I checked my phone twice, once outside and once again while standing on the entry mat, wiping rainwater from my shoes. Visiting hours started at 9. I had made sure of it. I always did. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. A television mounted high on the wall played a morning news segment with the sound turned down. An older man slept in a wheelchair near the window, his mouth open, a thin blanket slipping off his knees. Everything looked normal, almost peaceful. The receptionist smiled at me the way people do when they are about to say no but want to seem polite about it. "I'm sorry," she said, tapping her screen. "Visiting hours are over." I glanced at the digital clock behind her desk. 9:12. "I just got here," I said. "I'm here to see my mother. Maya Lawson." End quote. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes shifted, quick and practiced. She clicked something on her computer, then reached under the desk and pulled out a clipboard. She slid it toward me without meeting my gaze. "You're not listed as an approved visitor," she said. "I'll need you to step aside." I laughed. Just once. It came out wrong, sharp and thin. "That has to be a mistake," I said. "I'm her daughter. I'm here almost every day. Anna Great." She turned the clipboard so I could see it better and pointed to a column with her pen. "This is the authorized list," she said. "Your name isn't here." I leaned closer. The paper was fresh, no creases, no coffee stains, typed names, dates, signatures at the bottom. I saw my brother's name immediately. Ethan Lawson, printed cleanly, with a bold checkmark next to it. Below his name were two others I didn't recognize. My name wasn't there. "Can you call the nurse on duty?" I asked. My voice sounded calm. I had learned how to make it sound that way at work. "She knows me." The receptionist shook her head. "I can call the administrator," she said. "But the policy is clear." She picked up the phone before I could respond. I stepped back and looked around the lobby again, as if something might have changed in the last 30 seconds. The television was still playing silently. The old man in the wheelchair was still asleep. No one was watching me. No one was rushing over to help. A woman in scrubs walked past, pushing a medication cart. For a second, I thought she was one of the nurses who knew my mother, someone who would recognize me and wave. She didn't look up. The receptionist hung up the phone. "Someone will be with you shortly," she said. I waited. I stood there holding a canvas bag with folded clothes inside, the weight of it pulling on my shoulder. Through the open doorway to the left, I could see part of the hallway that led to the residential wing. Pale walls, framed watercolor prints, a handrail running the length of the corridor. I could picture my mother at the end of that hall, sitting in the chair by the window in her room, the one that looked out toward the parking lot and the line of cedar trees beyond it. She liked that chair because she could see when I arrived. A man in a gray blazer approached the desk. He was about my age, maybe early 40s, with neatly trimmed hair and a badge clipped to his pocket. "Miss Lawson," he said. "I'm Mark. I'm the floor administrator." I nodded. "There's been a mistake," I said. "I'm her daughter." "Yes," he said. "I understand this is upsetting." That was when my stomach tightened. Not because he contradicted me, but because he didn't ask any questions. "There was an update to your mother's care authorization last week," he continued. "The paperwork was reviewed and approved. Until it's resolved, we have to follow what's on file." "What update?" I asked. He gestured toward the clipboard. Medical and Visitation Authority. I didn't authorize anything, I said. He paused, then said, Your brother did. I felt something shift in my chest, slow and heavy, like furniture being dragged across a floor above me. That doesn't make sense, I said. My mother wanted me involved. We talked about this. When having stated, I'm not questioning that, he said gently. But legally, the document gives him decision-making authority. Can I see her? I asked. Just for 5 minutes. He shook his head. I'm sorry. I looked down at my hands. They were steady, no shaking, no tears. That surprised me more than anything else. I brought her clothes, I said, lifting the bag slightly. She needs them. We can have staff deliver them, he said. No, I said. I'll take them home. That was a lie. I didn't know why I said it. The bag felt heavier now, like it was full of something fragile. As I turned to leave, I noticed something small and wrong. A detail I wouldn't have caught if I didn't spend my days watching bodies and charts and wristbands. On the counter beside the receptionist was a plastic bracelet, clear with black lettering, the kind they used when residents were transferred between units. It had my mother's first name on it, but the last name was spelled wrong. 1 letter missing. Just one. No one commented on it. No one picked it up. It sat there, forgotten, like it didn't matter. Outside, the rain had picked up. I stood under the awning and pulled out my phone. I had 3 missed calls from the hospital. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I called my brother. He didn't answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text. Why can't I see Mom? Call me. The dots never appeared. I sat in my car for a long time with the engine off, watching water streak down the windshield. I thought about the papers I had signed a few weeks earlier at my kitchen table. Just temporary forms, Ethan had said. Just in case. You're exhausted. Let me help. I thought about how tired I had been, how relieved I felt handing something over, even for a moment. At 9:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please stop coming here unannounced. You're upsetting her. I stared at the screen. I had spent my career sitting beside people at the end of their lives, listening to their breathing change, watching numbers drop, holding hands when families couldn't. I knew what real emergencies looked like. I knew what fear sounded like. This wasn't that. This was something else. I put the phone face down on the seat and started the engine. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I understood one thing with sudden clarity. Whatever my brother had done, it was already bigger than a family argument. And whatever I believed about love, duty, and doing the right thing was about to be tested in ways I had never prepared for. I drove home on autopilot, taking the same turns I had taken 100 times before, my hands moving while my mind stayed behind in that lobby. The rain followed me all the way back to my neighborhood, soft at first, then heavier, tapping against the roof of my car like impatient fingers. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat there with the engine running until the clock on the dashboard ticked to 10:23 a.m. Only then did I turn the key. Inside the house, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears. I dropped the canvas bag by the door and kicked off my shoes without lining them up the way I usually did. My phone buzzed again. Another call from the hospital. I silenced it. I went straight to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't drink it. I just stood there, staring at the surface as it trembled slightly from my hand. I told myself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The same instructions I gave families when they were about to hear something they did not want to hear. Then I opened my laptop. I searched my email for my brother's name. Dozens of messages came up, most of them short, practical. Logistics, appointment reminders. He had always been good at sounding responsible when it mattered. One email from 3 weeks ago caught my eye. Just need you to sign these so I can talk to the insurance company for Mom. Temporary. I'll handle the calls so you can rest. There was an attachment. I clicked it. The document loaded slowly, page by page. Medical authorization, financial authorization, durable power of attorney. Words I knew well enough to respect but not well enough to fear. I remembered signing them at my kitchen table late at night, my eyes burning from exhaustion, my head aching from a double shift. I remembered my brother sitting across from me, coffee untouched, telling me I was doing the right thing. "You can't keep doing everything," he had said. "Let me carry some of it." I scrolled down. My signature sat at the bottom of the page. Clean, confident, no hesitation in the strokes. My stomach dropped. The document wasn't temporary. There was no end date, no conditional language. It was broad, comprehensive, total. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. For a moment, I considered calling him again, demanding answers, shouting, crying. I didn't. I knew how this kind of thing played out. Emotion first, reason later. By the time reason arrived, the damage was already done. Instead, I stood up and went to the hallway closet. I pulled out a small metal box from the top shelf. Inside were folders I hadn't touched in years. My mother's paperwork, insurance cards, old tax returns, notes written in her careful handwriting back when her hands were steadier. I laid everything out on the dining table and began sorting. I found the trust documents first. My father had insisted on setting it up years before he died, worried about what would happen if something went wrong. The trust held the house by the water, the one my mother still lived in until recently, and a modest amount of savings. Not enough to make anyone rich, enough to keep her safe. I read the trust line by line. The successor trustee was listed as Ethan Lawson. I closed my eyes. I remembered the conversation now. The way Ethan had brushed it off when I asked why his name was there instead of mine. "You live on the other side of the city," he had said. "I'm closer to the house. It's just practical." I had believed him. At noon, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. "Maya," my supervisor said. "Where are you?" "I had a family emergency," I said. There was a pause. "You were already on thin ice." "I know," I said. Another pause. "We'll talk tomorrow." The call ended. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow had been circled in red. A follow-up appointment with my mother's primary physician. An appointment I was suddenly no longer allowed to attend. I picked up my phone and sent a single message to Ethan. "We need to talk. Today." The response came almost immediately. "Not a good idea. You're too emotional." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain. Anger. Controlled. Focused. I typed back. "I signed papers. I want copies of everything you filed." A minute passed. Then 2. Then my phone buzzed. "You signed what you signed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That was when I knew. This wasn't about helping our mother. This wasn't about easing my burden. This was about control. I closed my laptop again and pushed the papers into neat stacks. The training I had relied on for years kicked in, the part of my brain that stayed calm when everything else was falling apart. Assess, prioritize, document. I opened a new file and titled it with my mother's name. Then I started writing. Dates, times, conversations, every visit I could remember, every odd comment from staff, every medication change I had questioned and been told not to worry about. I wrote until my fingers ached. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "This is Caleb Hart," a man said. "You left me a message. I'm 7." I had forgotten I'd called him earlier, my finger hovering over his name without thinking. We had gone to nursing school together before he switched careers. Insurance fraud investigation. I hadn't spoken to him in years. I didn't know who else to call. I said, "Tell me what's going on," he said. I did. Not everything, just enough. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Maya," he said finally, "this doesn't sound clean." "I know," I said. "Care facilities don't change access that fast without a reason," he said. "And they definitely don't block a primary caregiver unless someone higher up tells them to." "Can you look into it?" I asked. "I can't promise anything," he said, "but I can ask questions." "That's all I need," I said. We hung up, and for the first time that day, I felt something close to relief. Not hope, just the sense that I wasn't standing alone in the dark anymore. As evening settled in, I drove out to the house by the water. I hadn't been there since my mother was moved. The place looked the same from the outside: gray siding, white trim, the porch light still on a timer. Inside, the air smelled stale. The furniture was covered with sheets, as if someone had already decided no one would be living there again. On the kitchen counter, I found a folder I didn't recognize. Inside were copies of documents I had already seen, and one I hadn't. A listing agreement. The house was scheduled to go on the market in 5 days. I sat down at the table where my parents had eaten dinner for 30 years and stared at the paper until the words blurred. This was no longer just about seeing my mother. This was about stopping something that was already in motion. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that if I didn't act quickly, everything my mother thought she still owned, her home, her choices, her dignity, would be gone before she even knew it. I slept for less than 3 hours that night, stretched out on the couch at the beach house with the lights off and the curtains open. The sound of the waves should have been calming. Normally, it was. That steady rhythm had carried me through some of the worst nights of my life. This time, it felt like a countdown. At 5:18 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee using a machine I barely remembered how to operate. My mother had always handled the kitchen, even after my father passed. She liked things a certain way. Filters folded just right. Grounds measured by feel, not by spoon. I stared at the counter while the coffee brewed, noticing a thin layer of dust along the windowsill. Too much time had passed already. By 6, I was back in my car, heading toward Seattle, as the sky lightened from black to gray. I rehearsed what I would say if I was stopped again at the care facility. I told myself I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't beg. I would ask questions, precise ones. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. The air smelled like wet pavement and pine. When I reached the front entrance, the same receptionist was there, hair pulled back, coffee steaming beside her keyboard. She looked up and frowned slightly. "I'm not here to visit," I said before she could speak. "I'm here to request copies of my mother's medical records." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Those requests have to go through the authorized party." End quote. "I know," I said. "I'm filing a formal request under state law. I don't need approval to submit it." She hesitated, then reached for a different stack of papers under the desk. "Fill this out," she said. I took the form and moved to a small table near the window. As I wrote, I could feel her watching me. I filled in every line carefully, printing my name, my address, my license number. At the bottom, I checked the box for full treatment notes, medication logs, and incident reports. When I handed the form back, she glanced at it and sighed. "It can take up to 30 days, she said. "That's fine," I said. "Please stamp today's date on my copy." She did, pressing the stamp down harder than necessary. As I turned to leave, she spoke again. "You didn't hear this from me," she said quietly. "But your brother's been here a lot. Asking questions. Making changes." "Changes to what?" I asked. She shook her head. "Schedules, staff assignments." End quote. I nodded and walked out before she could say anything else. In my car, I wrote it down. Date, time, exact words. At 8:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. I pulled preliminary billing data. "Something is off. Can we talk?" I called him immediately. "They're billing for one-on-one supervision almost every night," he said. "High-tier care. But staffing records don't match." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means someone's getting paid for hours that don't exist," he said. "Or care that wasn't provided." I closed my eyes. "Is that fraud?" "Yes," he said. "If it's intentional. And if it involves decision makers, it gets worse." We agreed to meet later that afternoon. I hung up and sat there for a moment, letting the words settle. Fraud. It felt heavy but distant, like a diagnosis given to someone else. At 10, I went to the hospital for my shift, late and unprepared. I moved through the motions, checking vitals, adjusting pillows, listening to lungs. I smiled when I needed to. I charted carefully. No one mentioned the warning from yesterday. No one asked where I'd been. At noon, I slipped into an empty conference room and checked my phone. A voicemail from my brother. "Maya," he said, his voice tight. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. The doctors agree with me. Mom needs consistency. You coming in and out is confusing her." I deleted the message without responding. After my shift, I drove to a small diner near the freeway where Caleb was waiting. He had already spread papers across the table, coffee rings marking the edges. "I can't give you copies," he said as soon as I sat down, "but I can show you patterns." He slid one page toward me. "Dates, codes, dollar amounts. This line here," he said, tapping the paper, "shows a charge for overnight supervision on a night when the facility had no licensed staff assigned to her wing." Ennegrete. "That's not possible," I said. "It happens," he said, "but it shouldn't be billed." He flipped to another page. "And this medication adjustment? It coincides with increased billing. Higher acuity equals higher reimbursement." I thought of the bracelet with the wrong name. The way my mother had seemed more tired the last time I saw her. How she drifted off mid-sentence. "Can they medicate her without my consent?" I asked. "They can if they have authority," he said. "And according to what you told me, they do." I felt sick. "What do I do?" I asked. "You document everything," he said, "and you move fast." That evening, I went back to the beach house and opened every drawer, every cabinet. I found my mother's old planner in the hall closet, pages filled with neat notes and reminders. Doctor visits, birthdays, a list titled "Things to Tell Maya." The last entry was dated 2 weeks before she was moved. "Ethan says I forget things now. I don't think I do." My hands shook as I turned the page. "He says this is for the best." I sat on the floor and pressed the planner to my chest until the feeling passed. Later, as the sun set, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Headlights swept across the living room wall. Ethan walked in without knocking. "You shouldn't be here," he said, looking around. "This place is going on the market." I stood up slowly. "You blocked me from seeing her," I said. "She's safer this way," he replied. "Safer for who?" I asked. He didn't answer. We stared at each other, the sound of the ocean filling the space between us. "You signed the papers," he said finally. "You gave me authority." "I trusted you," I said. "That was your mistake," he said, too quickly. The words hung in the air. I watched his face as he realized what he had said. "Get out," I told him. He left without another word. When the door closed behind him, I knew something with a hard, painful clarity. This was no longer a misunderstanding between siblings. It was a calculated decision. And whatever came next would not be solved by asking nicely or appealing to family. It would be solved by proof. I didn't go back to the hospital the next morning. I called in sick, my voice steady enough to pass, and hung up before anyone could ask questions. I needed a day without interruptions, a day where I could think like something other than a daughter or a nurse. I needed to think like someone assembling a case. I drove to a public library downtown, the kind with long tables and quiet corners where no one noticed how long you stayed. I chose a seat near a window and spread my papers out carefully, aligning the edges the way I always did with charts at work. Dates on the left. Names highlighted. Notes written in the margins in neat, small handwriting. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. "Caleb, I spoke to someone I trust," he said. "Off the record." "What did they say?" I asked. "The facility your mother's in has been flagged before," he said. Nothing stuck. Complaints, billing irregularities, families who back down. "It's not Bill." "Why?" I asked. "Because the paperwork was airtight," he said. "Or at least it looked that way." I closed my eyes. "What does that mean for me?" "It means you need to be careful," he said. "They know how to stay just inside the lines." I looked at the stack of forms I'd requested yesterday. 30 days. That was too long. "I need access sooner," I said. Caleb was quiet for a moment. "There might be a way," he said slowly. "But it's not something I can do for you. Not directly." "Yes. Tell me," I said. "There's an ombudsman assigned to that facility," he said. "Independent. Their job is to protect residents' rights. If you can get them to open a file, it speeds everything up." "How do I do that?" I asked. "You show them a pattern," he said. "Not feelings, facts." After we hung up, I opened a new document and started a timeline. Not of what I felt, but of what had happened. The medication changes, the sudden restriction of visits, the listing agreement for the house, the billing spikes Caleb had shown me, the text message telling me to stop coming. At noon, I walked 3 blocks to a small office building and found the number posted on a plaque near the elevator, Long-Term Care Ombudsman. I dialed it from the hallway, my back against the wall. A woman answered, her voice warm but tired. "I'd like to file a concern," I said, regarding a resident at Evergreen Ridge Care. She asked for my mother's name. I gave it. She asked for my relationship. I said daughter. She asked, "Are you the authorized decision maker?" "No," I said. "I used to be." There was a pause. "Tell me what's going on," she said. I told her everything, sticking to dates and actions, avoiding words like betrayal or fear. When I finished, she didn't reassure me. She didn't apologize. She said, "I'll open a file today." I thanked her and hung up, my legs suddenly weak. In the afternoon, I drove back to the care facility. I didn't go inside. I sat across the street in my car, watching the entrance. Staff came and went. Deliveries arrived. Visitors signed in. At 3:47 p.m., I saw Ethan's car pull in. I took a photo. He stayed for 40 minutes. When he left, he looked relaxed, smiling, like someone who believed everything was under control. That night, I stayed at my own place for the first time in days. I cooked pasta and ate it standing at the counter, barely tasting it. I went to bed early but woke up every hour, my mind replaying conversations, scanning for details I might have missed. At 6:12 a.m., my phone rang. It was the ombudsman. "I went to the facility this morning," she said, unannounced. My heart raced. "And there are discrepancies," she said carefully. "Nothing I can formally state yet, but enough to warrant further review." "Does my brother know?" I asked. "Not yet," she said, "but he will." I thanked her again and ended the call. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not relief, momentum. By noon, Ethan texted me, "You went behind my back." I didn't respond. A second message followed. "You're making yourself look unstable." I turned the phone off. That afternoon, Caleb called again. "They're scrambling," he said. "I can't say how I know, but there's movement." "Movement where?" I asked. "Billing," he said. "Someone's adjusting codes retroactively. That's a bad sign. People do that when they're trying to clean up." "What do I do?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "Let them." The next day, I received a certified letter at my door. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. A law firm. Inside was a notice requesting that I cease contact with the care facility and with my mother, citing interference and emotional distress. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the folder with everything else. That evening, I sat on my couch and called the number listed for the trust's legal counsel. I introduced myself and asked a single question. Can a trustee sell trust property while an ombudsman investigation is active? There was a pause on the line. "No," the lawyer said. "Not without court approval." I smiled for the first time in days. I hung up and sent one message to Ethan. "The house can't be sold right now." He didn't reply. Later that night, as I was brushing my teeth, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "You don't understand what you're getting into." I stared at the message, then deleted it. I understood exactly what I was getting into. This wasn't a fight between siblings anymore. It was a system that had decided my mother was easier to manage on paper than as a person. And I was done being quiet. I turned off the light and lay in bed, listening to the familiar sounds of my building settling for the night. Somewhere across the city, my mother was sleeping under fluorescent lights, monitored by strangers. I promised myself then, without saying it out loud, that whatever came next, I would not let them reduce her life to line items and signatures. They had paperwork. I had time, patience, and the ability to wait until they made a mistake. The mistake came sooner than I expected. 2 days after the certified letter arrived, I received an automated email from the care facility's billing department. It was addressed to my mother, but my email was copied, a small clerical slip that no one had bothered to double-check. The subject line read, "Updated Statement of Services." I didn't open it right away. I forwarded it to a new folder and went on with my morning, answering work emails, pretending my life was still arranged in neat compartments. Only after I made coffee did I sit down and click. The statement was 8 pages long. I read it slowly, the way I read medication orders, line by line, looking for what didn't belong. Most of it looked ordinary at first glance. Room and board, daily care, basic monitoring. Then I reached the section labeled Enhanced Supervision. Night after night, the same charge appeared. One-on-one, observation from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 8 hours, premium rate. I checked the dates. There were charges for nights when I knew my brother had been out of town. Nights when my mother had told me, during one of our last phone calls, that she slept straight through until morning. I opened my notebook and started a list. Date, charge, amount. Then I pulled up the calendar on my phone and cross-referenced it with text messages, call logs, anything that could anchor those nights in reality. On 3 of the dates, I had spoken to my mother just before bedtime. Her voice had been clear, calm, no agitation, no confusion. I called Caleb. "They're billing enhanced supervision almost every night," I said. He exhaled slowly. "That's aggressive." "What does that tell you?" I asked. "It tells me someone believes no one will challenge it," he said. "Or that the person who could challenge it won't." I closed my eyes. "Can they justify it medically?" "They can try," he said, "but justification requires documentation." "Which they won't have," I said. "Exactly," he replied. That afternoon, I went back to the library and requested access to public inspection records for the facility, licenses, prior citations, staffing ratios. It took time. But time was something I had decided to spend freely now. I learned that Evergreen Ridge had changed management companies 18 months ago. New ownership, new billing practices, a fresh logo on the letterhead, the same building. I printed everything. At 4:30, my phone rang. The ombudsman again. "I wanted to let you know," she said. "We've received additional complaints, not just about billing." My heart thudded. "About what?" "Medication administration," she said. "Sedatives given without clear behavioral triggers." I thought of the planner entry. "Ethan says I forget things now." "Is my mother safe?" I asked. "She is not in immediate danger," the ombudsman said carefully, "but I am concerned." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay on my bed with the lights off, my mind moving through the information like a checklist. I thought about how care facilities protected themselves, how they documented compliance just well enough to survive inspections, how families, overwhelmed and guilty, often chose silence. I understood something then that made my chest tighten. This system counted on exhaustion. The next morning, I received another email. This one from a pharmacy provider. Prescription refill confirmation. My mother's name again, a dosage increase I hadn't been told about. I printed it and added it to the folder. At 10, Ethan finally called. "You need to stop this," he said without greeting. "Stop what?" I asked. "You're creating problems," he said. "The staff is nervous. The administrator called me." "I didn't do anything illegal," I said. "You're undermining my authority," he snapped. I let the silence stretch. "You signed it over," he continued. "You don't get to swoop back in now and act like a hero." "I'm not acting," I said. "I'm documenting." "Why can't you just trust me?" he asked. I almost laughed. "Because I trusted you already," I said. "And I'm standing outside a locked door because of it." He didn't answer. "I saw the billing statements," I continued. "One-on-one supervision every night. That's expensive." "You wouldn't understand," he said. "The doctors recommended it." "Then there should be notes," I said. "Clear ones." His breathing changed. "Just slightly. This is what's best for Mom," he said. "And for us." "For who?" I asked. "For everyone," he said too quickly. When the call ended, my hands were cold. I drove to the care facility again, this time not to go inside, but to walk around the perimeter. I counted cameras, I noted entrances, I watched shift changes. At the back of the building, near the loading dock, I saw something small that made me stop. A cardboard box, half collapsed from rain, filled with discarded wristbands. I bent down and sifted through them. Names, dates, barcodes. Some were crossed out with pen. Others weren't. One had my mother's first name. The last name was spelled wrong. Again, I took a photo and placed it gently back where I found it. That evening, Caleb sent me a message. They're changing billing codes again, removing enhanced supervision from 2 nights. Why? I asked when I called him. Because someone's looking, he said. But they missed others. Can you get me staff schedules? I asked. He hesitated. That's sensitive. I don't need names, I said. Just numbers. There was a pause. I'll see what I can do, he said. When he sent the file an hour later, I printed it and laid it next to the billing statements. The mismatch was obvious. On at least 5 nights, there were fewer staff members than billed supervision hours. It wasn't a gray area. It was a gap. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes when something unspoken finally takes shape. This was no longer about my brother alone. He might have started it, he might have benefited from it, but he hadn't designed this. He had stepped into a machine that was already running. Late that night, I opened my laptop and drafted a formal complaint to the state health department. I attached copies of billing statements, medication changes, and staffing discrepancies. I wrote plainly, no emotion, just facts. Before I hit send, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. If you keep pushing, you're going to hurt Mom. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I pressed send. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. As I closed the laptop, I realized something else. Something quieter but more dangerous. They were going to fight back. And the next move would not be about paperwork. It would be about me. The first sign that they were coming after me arrived disguised as concern. It was an email from Human Resources at the hospital, sent just after 7 in the morning. The subject line read, "Request for meeting." No explanation, no context, just a time slot and a room number. I stood in my kitchen rereading it while my coffee went cold. I had learned over the years that real emergencies came with phone calls, not calendar invites. This was procedural, clean, quiet. At work, no one met my eyes. A nurse I usually joked with asked if I was feeling better, her smile too careful. Another colleague avoided the supply room when she saw me heading in. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting across from my supervisor and a woman from HR I had never met before. She wore a gray cardigan and held a thin folder on her lap. "We've received a report," the HR woman said, folding her hands. "A confidential one." "About what?" I asked. She opened the folder. "Concerns regarding your professional boundaries." I did not comment. My supervisor looked uncomfortable. "Maya, this is informal. We just need to ask a few questions." "What kind of concerns?" I asked. The HR woman glanced down. "Allegations that you accessed patient medication improperly and shared confidential information outside the hospital." The room felt smaller. "That's not true," I said. "We're not saying it is," my supervisor said quickly, "but we have to look into it." "Who made the report?" I asked. "That information is protected," the HR woman said. I nodded slowly. "Then I'll need to see the evidence." She hesitated. "At this stage, there isn't any. Just a complaint." I felt a flicker of something sharp and bitter. "A complaint without evidence," I said. "About a nurse who has worked here for 12 years without a single infraction." The HR woman's smile tightened. "As I said, this is preliminary. I want that on record," I said. "Preliminary, no evidence." End quote. She nodded and made a note. When the meeting ended, I walked straight to my locker and pulled out my phone. I called Caleb before I reached the parking garage. "They're trying to discredit me," I said. "Of course they are," he replied. "It's textbook. My brother doesn't have that kind of reach," I said. "No," Caleb agreed. "But the facility does. And if they're under investigation, they'll try to neutralize the loudest variable." I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel. "What do I do?" "You protect yourself," he said. "And you don't react emotionally. That's what they want." That afternoon, I requested copies of my own employment records, performance reviews, Incident reports, medication access logs, anything with my name on it. I printed everything and added it to the growing stack at home. When I got back to my apartment, there was a man waiting by the door, mid-50s, clean jacket, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Miss Lawson?" he asked. "Yes. I'm with Adult Protective Services," he said. "May I ask you a few questions?" My heart pounded, but my voice stayed level. "About what?" "About your mother," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. He asked about my visits, my relationship with my brother, my concerns about the facility. I answered carefully, sticking to facts. When he asked why I hadn't reported my worries sooner, I told him the truth. "I trusted my family," I said. "That was my mistake." He nodded. "That happens more often than you think." Before he left, he handed me a card. "If anyone tries to intimidate you, document it," he said. Immediately. That night, Ethan called again. "You went to the state," he said, his voice low. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I filed a report," I said. "That's all. You're dragging our family through the mud," he snapped. "People are asking questions." "Good," I said. "They should." There was a long pause. "They're watching you now," he said quietly. "So am I," I replied. He hung up. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Messages from coworkers. A group email from administration reminding staff about confidentiality policies. A subtle warning disguised as routine. I forwarded everything to a new folder labeled Retaliation. At noon, I received a text from an unknown number. "If you keep this up, your license will be at risk." No greeting. No signature. I took a screenshot and saved it. I didn't respond. That evening, Caleb called. "They're leaking something," he said. I heard chatter about a complaint being escalated. "Against me?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "but it's thin. They're phishing. Who's behind it?" I asked. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I know this. If they had real evidence, you'd already be suspended." I exhaled slowly. "What about my mother?" I asked. "She's still there," he said. "No change in status. It's tabled as STID." That was both a relief and a warning. The following day, I drove to the care facility again, this time with a purpose. I parked in a visitor spot and sat there, watching the entrance. I wasn't there to go inside. I was there to be seen. At exactly 2:15, a woman in a navy suit walked out, speaking urgently into her phone. I recognized her from the facility's website. Regional Director. I took a photo. At 3, my brother arrived. He went in without signing the visitor log. I took another photo. That night, I wrote everything down. Times, faces, license plate numbers. I felt like someone else was moving my hand, someone methodical and detached. I realized then what they were doing. They weren't trying to prove I was wrong. They were trying to exhaust me. They wanted me distracted, defensive, afraid, focused on protecting my job instead of my mother. I lay awake in the dark, listening to the city outside my window, and made a decision that felt both terrifying and clear. If they wanted to make me the problem, I would stop being visible. I would stop reacting. I would let them believe their tactics were working. The next morning, I declined overtime shifts. I stopped calling the facility. I didn't answer Ethan's texts. I didn't push. And somewhere in the silence I created, they grew careless. Because systems that rely on intimidation always assume one thing, that the person on the other side will break. They never expect patience. They never expect someone to wait long enough for them to reveal exactly where the rod is hiding. And I was done moving first. I stayed quiet for 9 days. No calls, no emails, no surprise appearances. I went to work, did my shifts, charted meticulously, and went home. I stopped driving past the care facility. I stopped checking the public listing for the house by the water. I even stopped opening the billing emails that still arrived, unread, stacking in my inbox like unopened letters from a war zone. Silence, I learned, made people uncomfortable. On the 3rd day, Ethan texted me, "We need to talk like adults." I didn't reply. On the 5th day, the facility's administrator emailed me directly, something she had never done before. We would like to resolve this amicably. I archived it. By the 7th day, Caleb called me with a different tone in his voice. "They're nervous," he said. "What changed?" I asked. "They think you backed off," he said. "And when people think the threat is gone, they get sloppy." That night, I opened the unread billing emails and downloaded every attachment. I printed them and laid them out across my living room floor, page after page, creating a timeline you could walk through if you wanted. Charges climbed, dipped, climbed again. Codes changed. Descriptions shifted slightly, like someone adjusting a story mid-sentence. At the center of it all was 1 week. The week after I filed the state complaint. Billing codes had been altered retroactively. Enhanced supervision removed from some nights, added to others. As if someone were trying to smooth the numbers without erasing them completely. I called Caleb. "They're rewriting history," I said. "Yes," he said. "And that's good." "How?" I asked. "Because revisions leave fingerprints," he said. "Original submissions don't vanish. They get archived." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Permission," he said, "to nudge them." I understood immediately. "What kind of nudge?" I asked. "A small one," he said, "enough to make them move money." End quote. The next morning, I called the trust's legal counsel again. "I have a question," I said calmly. "If the trustee incurs expenses during an investigation that appear unnecessary or inflated, is he personally liable?" There was a pause. "If it can be shown they were not in the beneficiary's best interest," the lawyer said. "Yes." I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, Ethan called me from a different number. "You're being quiet," he said. "That worries me." "I'm tired," I said. "This has taken a lot out of me." He exhaled. "Good. Then let's end it." "I agree," I said. There was a beat of silence. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want Mom comfortable," I said. "And I want the bills under control." "That's it." "That's already happening," he said quickly. "Then you won't mind if I review them," I said. Another pause. "I can send you summaries," he said. "I want originals," I replied. "Full statements." "That's not necessary," he said. "It is if I'm stepping back," I said. "I need closure." I could hear him thinking. "I'll see what I can do," he said. 2 hours later, an email arrived from the facility's finance office. Attached were documents I hadn't seen before, internal summaries, adjusted totals, a polite cover note explaining the changes as routine corrections. They had taken the bait. I forwarded everything to Caleb. "They moved the money," he texted back minutes later. "From one account to another. Dediam." "Why?" I asked. "To shield it," he said, "which means they're scared." That night, I logged into the state's public court portal and searched for recent filings involving the facility's parent company. There were none, no lawsuits, no sanctions, yet, but there was something else. A lien filed quietly 3 months earlier against one of the shell companies that handled staffing. Unpaid taxes, small amount, easy to miss. I cross-referenced the shell company name with the billing summaries. It appeared twice. I didn't tell Caleb right away. I wanted to be sure. The next day, I took a personal day and drove to the care facility for the first time in over a week. I didn't go inside. I parked down the street and waited. At 10:42, a courier arrived with a stack of boxes, medical records storage. I took photos as they were unloaded. At 11, a man in a suit came out, talking on his phone, his tie loosened. He looked irritated. He glanced around the parking lot, then walked faster. At noon, my phone buzzed. "Ethan, they're asking for more documentation," he said. "Because of you." "I didn't do anything," I said. "You talked to the lawyer," he said. "I asked a question," I replied. He lowered his voice. "You're playing a dangerous game." "So are you," I said. He hung up. That afternoon, Caleb called me. "I think I found it," he said. "Found what?" I asked. "The pivot point," he said. "They're shifting costs to a third-party vendor, a staffing agency that barely exists." "That's the shell company," I said. "Yes," he replied. "And if money is flowing there, it's traceable." "What do you need?" I asked. "Time," he said. "And one more push." That push came from me. I sent a single certified letter to the facility, requesting a formal meeting to discuss care options for my mother, citing my intention to cooperate and move forward constructively. I copied the Ombudsman and the Trust's counsel. The response was immediate. A meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. They wanted me in the room. That weekend, I prepared. Not speeches, not arguments, questions. Why was enhanced supervision billed without corresponding notes? Why were codes changed after submission? Why was a third-party vendor used on nights with full staff? I printed everything in triplicate. Monday morning, I walked into the conference room with my folder tucked under my arm. Ethan was already there, sitting too straight. Across from him were two administrators and a woman from legal. They smiled. They thanked me for coming. They told me they wanted to work together. I nodded and listened. When it was my turn, I didn't accuse. I asked. The room shifted. Explanations overlapped. Words like oversight and clerical error floated in the air. Someone mentioned the pandemic. Someone else mentioned staff shortages. I let them talk. Then I placed one document on the table. "Can you explain this vendor?" I asked. Silence. The lawyer glanced at the administrator. The administrator cleared his throat. "That's a standard subcontractor," he said. "For 5 nights with no staff on site?" I asked. More silence. I didn't push further. I thanked them for their time and left. In the parking lot, my hands were steady. They had confirmed what I needed. They had acknowledged the shape of the lie without realizing it. That night, Caleb called me. "They're exposed," he said. "They just don't know how much." I sat on my couch, staring at the wall. "Then we wait," I said. "Yes," he replied. "Now we wait." Because the most dangerous moment for any system built on quiet exploitation is when it believes the crisis has passed. And they believed I was done. They had no idea I was only changing tactics. The blow landed on a Tuesday morning, soft enough at first that I almost missed it. I was halfway through charting when my phone buzzed with a notification from an internal system I rarely thought about anymore. Nursing Credentialing Portal. I tapped it without concern, expecting a routine reminder. Instead, a red banner filled the screen. License status under review. For a moment, I simply stared at it, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something less serious. They didn't. I locked the screen and finished my charting before standing up. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I walked down the hallway to the break room, closed the door behind me, and sat at the small table beneath the corkboard filled with outdated flyers. I opened the message again. An anonymous report had been filed with the state board, alleging unsafe medication practices and boundary violations involving a family member. The language was careful, vague, just specific enough to trigger a review. There it was. They had moved from intimidation to damage. I didn't cry. I didn't swear. I pulled out my notebook and wrote the time. 8:46 a.m. Then, I called Caleb. "They escalated," I said. "I was afraid of that," he replied. "But this confirms something." "What?" I asked. "They're not confident anymore," he said. "People who are confident don't pull this lever." At 10:30, my supervisor asked me to step into her office. "I'm so sorry," she said, before I even sat down. "This came out of nowhere." "Did it?" I asked. She looked at me carefully. "You're not suspended," she said. "But you'll be reassigned until the board completes its review." "Meaning no patient contact," I said. She nodded. I thanked her for telling me and left before she could say anything else. In the parking garage, I sat in my car and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. This was the line they knew mattered. My license wasn't just my job. It was my credibility, my identity, the reason anyone took me seriously when I spoke about care. They were trying to take my voice. I drove home slowly, forcing myself not to speed, not to draw attention. When I reached my apartment, there was a man standing in the hallway near my door. Early 30s, messenger bag slung over one shoulder. "Miss Lawson?" he asked. "Yes. I'm with the state board," he said. "May we talk?" I let him in. He sat at my kitchen table while I poured water for both of us. He asked about my work history, my training, my relationship with my mother. He asked if I had ever administered medication outside of protocol. No, I said. Have you ever accessed medication records without authorization? He asked. No, I repeated. He nodded and wrote something down. Do you know who filed the report? I asked. No, he said, but I can tell you it was detailed enough to require follow-up. End quote. After he left, I sat in silence for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I tried to warn you. That was it. No accusation, no apology, just a quiet claim of inevitability. I forwarded the message to my retaliation folder. That afternoon, Caleb came over with his laptop. We sat on the floor, surrounded by papers and cables, like we were assembling something fragile. They're pushing all the pressure points at once, he said. Employment, licensing, family, and a day. Can they win? I asked. Only if you panic, he said. I'm not panicking, I said. I know, he replied. That's why we're still in this. He pulled up a screen and rotated it toward me. I traced the Shell staffing company, he said. It's linked to a consulting firm that handles regulatory compliance. I leaned forward. For the facility? For the facility and the board, he said. My stomach dropped. You're saying? I'm saying there's overlap, he said. Not illegal on its face, but questionable. I sat back, the pieces clicking into place. They didn't just report me, I said. They routed it. Yes, he said. They used the system. I looked at the stacks of evidence around us. Then we use it too. That evening, I wrote a formal response to the board. 12 pages, calm, factual, attached with logs from the hospital, medication access records, performance reviews, and copies of every communication from the care facility and my brother. I didn't accuse. I contextualized. I framed the report as potential retaliation tied to a whistleblower complaint regarding elder care billing. By midnight, it was submitted. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:15. The ombudsman. I wanted you to hear this from me, she said. The facility has been notified of a deeper review. How deep? I asked. Deep enough that they've retained outside counsel, she said, and deep enough that they're not comfortable anymore. It's not of Newark. That afternoon, I received an email from the facility's legal team requesting a postponement of the trust meeting. No explanation. They were retreating. At 5, Caleb called again. They're scrambling internally, he said, moving emails, changing passwords. Good, I said. That means they're scared. But there's something else, he said. What? I asked. Someone reached out to me, he said. Off the books. Who? I asked. A former billing coordinator, he said. She says she has copies of original submissions before the revisions. My heart raced. Does she want money? She wants protection, he said. And a way out. I closed my eyes. This was the moment I had been working toward without admitting it. The moment when someone on the inside cracked. When can we meet her? I asked. Tomorrow, he said. But there's a catch. There's always a catch, I said. She's terrified, he said, and she doesn't trust you. Anner, that makes sense, I replied. She only agreed to talk because she thinks you're done, he said. I smiled, slow and cold. Then let her think that, I said. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The red banner from the licensing portal burned into my memory. They thought they had taken my leverage. They thought they had forced me into defense. They were wrong. They had just shown me how far they were willing to go to protect the lie. And the deeper a lie goes, the louder it collapses when it finally hits the ground. Tomorrow, someone was going to hand me the truth they forgot to destroy. And from that moment on, the balance would shift. I met her in a grocery store parking lot just after sunrise, the kind of place where no one noticed anyone else for very long. The sky was low and gray, the air damp enough to cling to your clothes. Caleb parked 2 rows away and stayed in the car. This wasn't a meeting that needed witnesses. She sat in a compact sedan with a cracked windshield and a child's booster seat in the back. When I approached, she rolled the window down an inch, just enough to speak. "You're not recording, are you?" she asked. "No," I said, "and I won't." She studied my face, looking for something she could trust. I didn't rush her. People who were afraid needed time to decide who you were. My name is Lila, she said finally. I used to handle billing submissions. Before they moved everything to the vendor. Why talk to us? I asked. Because they're burning the bridge behind me, she said. And I don't want to be standing on it when it collapses. We have 9. She handed me a sealed envelope through the narrow opening. Inside were printed emails, timestamps visible, and a flash drive taped to the back page. These are the originals, she said, before the revisions. I took the envelope and held it on my lap without opening it. What do you want? I asked. I want immunity, she said, or as close as I can get. I can't promise that, I said, but I can promise the truth will matter. She nodded once. That's all I need. I'm Selv. Before she drove away, she looked at me again. They told me you were unstable, she said quietly. That you were obsessed. I met her gaze. And you still came. She gave a small, sad smile and pulled out of the lot. I didn't open the envelope until I got home. I spread everything out on the table and went through it piece by piece. The emails confirmed what Caleb suspected. Billing codes changed after submission. Notes added retroactively. A directive to use the Shell staffing company for certain charges to keep reimbursement thresholds high. One message stopped me cold. If family pushes back, escalate through licensing. We can't afford scrutiny right now. There was no name attached, just an internal handle I didn't recognize. I felt a hollow calm settle over me. By noon, Caleb had reviewed the files. This is enough, he said. This blows the billing side wide open. What about the licensing complaint? I asked. He scrolled through the emails again. We can't tie it directly yet, he said. But we can apply pressure. How? I asked. By doing something they won't expect, he said. That afternoon, I called Ethan. He answered on the 3rd ring. I want to settle this, I said. There was a long pause. What does that mean? It means I'm tired, I said. I'm not fighting you anymore. He laughed softly. You should have said that weeks ago. I know, I said. I was angry. It's God. And now? He asked. Now I just want Mom comfortable, I said. I don't want to be involved. He hesitated. What are you asking for? I want to visit her again, I said. No arguments, no paperwork changes, just visits. That's all? He asked. Yes, I said. Another pause. Then, I'll see what I can do. 2 hours later, I received an email from the facility. Visiting privileges reinstated on a trial basis. 1 hour per day. Supervised. I forwarded it to Caleb. They think you folded, he said. Good, I replied. The next morning, I walked into the care facility for the first time in weeks. The receptionist smiled too brightly. The administrator shook my hand like this was a fresh start. They led me down the hallway and into my mother's room. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was thinner. Her hands lay folded on the blanket, restless. When she saw me, her face lit up, then clouded with confusion. Maya? She asked. Yes, I said, sitting beside her. It's me. She reached for my hand and held it tightly, as if afraid I might disappear again. They said you were busy, she whispered. I swallowed. I'm here now. A nurse stood near the door, pretending not to listen. I spoke carefully. About small things. The weather. The cardigan I had brought weeks ago, still folded in my bag. As I talked, I watched my mother's eyes. When the nurse stepped closer, they dulled. When she stepped away, they sharpened. That told me more than any chart ever could. After the visit, I asked to speak with the administrator. I appreciate the cooperation, I said. I want to help resolve the billing confusion. He nodded eagerly. Of course. I'd like copies of the original submissions, I said. Before the revisions. For my records. His smile froze for just a second. I'm not sure that's necessary, he said. I think it is, I replied. For closure. He promised to follow up. That evening, Caleb and I prepared the next move. We drafted a formal request to the state for preservation of records, citing potential destruction of evidence. We didn't send it yet. We waited. 2 days later, the billing coordinator emailed me directly. A polite note. Attached documents. Revised summaries only. I replied with one sentence. Thank you. Please include the original submissions as well. An hour passed. Then two. Then my phone rang. The administrator. We're feeling pressured, he said. This isn't productive. I agree, I said. Which is why I'd like transparency. He sighed. Let me talk to legal. At midnight, an email arrived. Attached were files they never intended to share. I forwarded them to Caleb without opening them. Now, he said, after reviewing them, we move. The following morning, we submitted everything. The original billing, the revisions, the emails, the directive about family escalation. We sent it to the state, the insurer, and the ombudsman. By noon, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. Ethan called last. What did you do? He demanded. I told the truth, I said. You said you were done, he shouted. I said I was tired, I replied. Not finished. He went silent. That evening, the news broke quietly. Not headlines. Just a notice on the state website. Evergreen Ridge under investigation for billing irregularities and regulatory violations. I sat on my couch and watched the screen glow. This was the point of no return. But I knew something else, too. The hardest part was still ahead. Because exposing a system was one thing. Deciding what to do with the people caught inside it was another. And soon, I would have to choose what justice actually meant to me. The facility changed overnight. That was the first thing I noticed when I arrived the morning after the investigation notice went public. The parking lot was half empty. The usual delivery van wasn't there. Two unfamiliar security guards stood near the entrance, their posture stiff, their eyes alert in a way that suggested they were there to be seen. Inside, the lobby felt louder without anyone speaking. Phones rang and stopped abruptly. Staff moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. The television was turned off. The receptionist didn't smile this time. She checked my name twice before handing me a visitor badge. Her hands shook just enough for me to notice. They're doing audits today, she said, as if that explained everything. It explains enough, I replied. In my mother's room, the nurse assigned to us was different. Younger, nervous. She hovered near the medication cart, glancing at the hallway every few seconds. My mother looked at me, then at the nurse, then back at me. Did I do something wrong? She whispered. No, I said softly, taking her hand. You didn't. Her fingers were cold. When the nurse stepped out to answer a call, my mother leaned closer. Your brother's been angry, she said. He said you were trying to hurt him. The words landed quietly but hard. I'm trying to protect you, I said. She studied my face the way she used to when I was a child, as if deciding whether to believe me. They give me pills now, she said. At night. They say it helps me sleep. Do you feel like you need them? I asked. She shook her head. They make it hard to think. I nodded and tucked that away. After the visit, I asked to see the charge nurse. She hesitated, then led me into a small office cluttered with binders and half-emptied coffee cups. I asked for my mother's current medication list. She handed it over without comment. 3 medications had been added in the past 2 weeks. All sedating, all ordered as standing doses, not as needed. Who approved these? I asked. She looked down. The attending physician. Can you show me the behavioral notes that support them? I asked. Her jaw tightened. I'll have to check, she said. Please do, I replied. I left the office and walked down the hall slowly, counting doors, listening. In one room, a resident was calling out, her voice hoarse. No one answered. In another, a television blared an infomercial at full volume, the screen flashing too brightly. This wasn't just about my mother anymore. At noon, Caleb called. They're in damage control, he said. The insurer froze reimbursements pending review. What does that mean for the residents? I asked. It means the facility's cash flow is tight, he said, and that makes people desperate. As if summoned by the word, my phone buzzed with a call from Ethan. I stepped outside to take it. What did you do? He demanded again, his voice sharper this time. I reported fraud, I said. You destroyed everything, he said. They're talking about shutting the place down. They're talking about accountability, I replied. You don't get it, he said. If this place goes under, Mom will have to move again. Do you know what that does to someone like her? I closed my eyes. I know exactly what it does, I said. That's why I tried to stop you quietly. He laughed bitterly. You think you're the hero here? No, I said. I think I waited too long. He hung up. That afternoon, the ombudsman met me in the lobby. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed red. We're recommending immediate adjustments, she said. Medication reviews, staffing oversight, potential transfers for high-risk residents. And my mother? I asked. She qualifies, she said. But there's a problem. What problem? I asked. There aren't many open beds nearby, she said. If she moves, it might be far. My chest tightened. Can we delay? I asked. For a short time, she said, but only if there's a safe alternative. That night, I sat in my car outside the facility, long after visiting hours ended. I watched lights flicker on and off in the windows. I thought about the planner entry. He says this is for the best. I realized then what the real trap was. The system didn't just steal money. It stole time. Time families needed to make good decisions. Time residents needed to feel safe. Time that could never be refunded. When I got home, there was an email waiting for me from the board. Preliminary review completed. No immediate action against license. Investigation ongoing. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But relief didn't last. Attached to the email was a note from a compliance officer requesting a meeting. Not about me, about Caleb. I stared at the screen. They were widening the circle. I called him immediately. They're looking at you, I said. I know, he replied calmly. I expected it. Are you okay? I asked. Yes, he said. But this is where it gets complicated. How? I asked. He hesitated. There's something I didn't tell you, he said. About how long this has been going on. I leaned back against the couch, my heart pounding. Tell me, I said. I've seen versions of this before, he said. Different facilities, same patterns. And? I asked. And sometimes, he said slowly, the people who survive are the ones who stop pushing before the whole thing collapses. I knew what he was asking without him saying it. He was offering me an exit. If I stop now, I said, what happens? They clean house just enough, he said. Fire a few people. Change names. Rebrand. And the residents? I asked. They stay, he said. Which matters. I stared at the wall, my thoughts racing. If I kept going, the facility might shut down. Residents would be displaced. Some would suffer, maybe even my mother. If I stopped, the system would survive. Slimmed down, smarter, ready to do it again somewhere else. This was the choice no one prepared you for. Not between right and wrong, but between harm now and harm later. I looked at my hands, steady in my lap. I need time, I said. Of course, Caleb replied, but not much. After the call, I sat in silence until the room grew dark. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. Someone laughed on the sidewalk. Inside, I faced the truth I had been avoiding. Winning this case might cost people who had nothing to do with it. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't sure what justice looked like anymore. I only knew that whatever I chose next would define more than the outcome. It would define me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, listening to the refrigerator hum and the occasional car pass outside, every sound amplified by the weight of the choice in front of me. I had spent weeks believing that the hardest part would be proving the truth. I had been wrong. The truth was heavy, but it was simple. This was not. By morning, my phone held 3 missed calls from Caleb and one from an unknown number I suspected was another attorney. I didn't return any of them. Instead, I made coffee and opened my mother's planner again, flipping to the back pages I hadn't read yet. There was a list written in pencil, faint and uneven. Things I worry about. My name was first, then Ethan's, then the house, then, written smaller beneath everything else, being moved again. I closed the planner and pressed my palm against the cover until the ache in my chest dulled. At 9, I drove to the care facility. The security guards recognized me now. They didn't stop me. That was new. My mother was awake when I arrived, sitting upright with a blanket around her shoulders. She looked more alert than she had in weeks, her eyes clearer. "They forgot my pill last night," she said quietly. "I slept better." I nodded, filing it away. We talked for a while, about small things. The view from her window, a bird she'd seen on the railing. The blue cardigan still folded in my bag because the room was warm. When our hour was almost up, she squeezed my hand. "You're tired," she said. "I'll be okay," I replied. She studied me, then said, "Your father used to say that when something is wrong, you don't fix it by pretending it isn't happening." I smiled. "That sounds like him." She leaned closer. "But he also said you don't burn the house down just to prove there's smoke." I laughed softly, then stopped. "You're saying I should stop," I said. She shrugged. "I'm saying I don't want to be the reason other people get hurt." I felt tears sting my eyes, sudden and unwelcome. "You're not," I said. She shook her head. "Maybe not, but I'm part of it." When I left the room, I didn't go straight home. I drove to a small park near the water and sat on a bench, watching ferries move slowly across the bay. I called Caleb. "I want to talk," I said. We met an hour later in a quiet cafe, sitting in a corner where no one could overhear us. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "They're pressing me," he said as soon as we sat down. Subtle questions. Requests for cooperation. "About what?" I asked. "About how I got the information," he said. "And why? And what did you say?" I asked. "The truth," he said. "That I was concerned about fraud." I nodded. "And the part you didn't tell me?" He looked away. "My son," he said. "He's been sick, long term. Treatments aren't cheap." The words settled between us. "So you looked the other way before," I said quietly. "Yes," he said. "Not with your mother's case, but before." "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm trying to make it right," he said. "But that doesn't erase what I did." I thought about the email. If family pushes back, escalate through licensing. I thought about the overlap between the consulting firm and the board, the way systems protected themselves by turning people into shields. "They'll offer you a deal," I said. He nodded. "They already have. If I cooperate quietly, this ends smaller. And if you don't?" I asked. "They make me the story," he said. "And everything else fades." I leaned back and closed my eyes. This was the missing piece, the one I hadn't wanted to see. Caleb wasn't just my ally. He was part of the same compromised system, trying to claw his way out. I could push forward and expose everything: the facility, the shell companies, the regulatory overlap. Caleb, it would be clean in one way, ugly in another. Or I could choose a different ending. "What if," I said slowly, "we separate the harm?" He looked at me. "What do you mean?" "What if the investigation focuses on resident safety and restitution?" I said, "not maximum punishment." "That's not entirely up to us," he said. "It is if we frame it right," I replied. "If the evidence leads there." He studied me. "You're talking about limiting scope." "I'm talking about prioritizing victims," I said. "Not headlines." In about. Silence stretched between us. "They'll still shut down some operations," he said. "People will lose jobs." "People already are," I said, quietly. "And you?" he asked. "What do you get?" I didn't answer right away. "I get my mother out," I said finally. "And I make sure other families get help before this place rebrands and does it again." He frowned. "How?" "Restitution," I said. "Oversight, mandatory transfers for residents who want them, and a permanent mark on their license." "It isn't okay," he shook his head slowly. "You could destroy them." "I don't want to," I said. "I want to stop them." That afternoon, I met with the ombudsman and 2 state investigators. I laid out everything again, but this time I emphasized different things: medication safety, improper sedation, financial harm to families, the need for immediate protections. I did not push for criminal charges. I pushed for intervention. They listened. When they asked about the shell companies, I answered carefully. "Yes," I said. "There are deeper issues, but right now residents are the priority." After the meeting, one of the investigators pulled me aside. "You're leaving leverage on the table," she said. "I know," I replied. "Why?" she asked. Because leverage cuts both ways, I said. That night, Ethan showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked smaller than I remembered, his confidence cracked. You could have ruined me, he said. I still can, I replied calmly. He swallowed. Why didn't you? I thought about my mother's list. About Caleb's son. About the residents down the hall calling out to no one. Because this isn't about punishing you, I said. It's about stopping what you helped start. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. I don't know how to fix this, he said. You don't, I replied. You stay out of the way. He left without another word. Later, alone in my living room, I felt something loosen inside me. Not relief, not victory, acceptance. I had chosen a path that didn't feel clean or heroic. It felt heavy and incomplete, but it felt right. The system wouldn't burn. It would be forced to change. And tomorrow, I would make the last decision that mattered. Not about exposure, but about what kind of justice I was willing to live with. The transfer happened quietly, without announcements or cameras, or the sense of finality I had imagined. My mother was moved on a Thursday morning, just after breakfast, when the hallways were busiest and no one had time to ask questions. A different facility across the city had agreed to take her temporarily, one with a smaller census and an open bed near a window. I signed the papers with a steady hand, not as a daughter pleading for permission. As the authorized advocate listed on the emergency order, the nurse who helped pack my mother's things worked carefully, folding clothes instead of stuffing them into bags. When she handed me the blue cardigan, still unworn, she hesitated. I'm glad she's leaving, she said quietly. Some of us tried to say something. I nodded. I didn't ask why they hadn't said more. I already knew the answer. My mother slept through most of the drive. The medication review had started 2 days earlier, and the difference was already visible. Her breathing was lighter. Her hands no longer trembled in her lap. When we arrived, a social worker met us at the door. She spoke slowly, explained everything twice, made sure my mother heard her name used correctly, spelled correctly. That mattered more than it should have. After I tucked my mother into her new room, I stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall. I stayed there until the tightness in my chest eased, until the sound of my own breathing returned to something normal. That afternoon, the restitution plan was finalized. Families were notified. Letters went out. Accounts were reviewed and credited. Not everything could be recovered, but enough was returned to make the losses visible instead of invisible. Enough to make silence harder next time. The facility issued a statement. Neutral language. Operational adjustments. Commitment to improvement. No apology. That was fine. The real consequences didn't live in press releases. They lived in oversight requirements, in frozen licenses, in the permanent note attached to their record that no rebranding could erase. Caleb called me that evening. I accepted the deal, he said. What kind? I asked. Full cooperation, he said. No immunity. Reduced exposure. And your son? I asked. Covered, he said quietly. For now. I closed my eyes. I'm glad. End of then. End of the day. End of the day. End of the day. So am I, he replied. Even if it costs me. After we hung up, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by empty folders and cleared surfaces. The stacks of paper were gone, the timelines dismantled, evidence submitted, stored, sealed. There was nothing left to prove. 2 weeks later, the board closed its review of my license. No action taken. The report was deemed unsubstantiated, potentially retaliatory. The language was clinical, impersonal. It felt like an exhale I didn't know I had been holding. I returned to patient care slowly, choosing shorter shifts, quieter rooms. The work felt different now, not heavier, sharper. I listened more carefully. I noticed small things sooner. At the new facility, my mother began to settle into a rhythm. She remembered names again. She slept through the night without pills. She started correcting people when they finished her sentences for her. One afternoon, while we sat by the window watching rain streak down the glass, she turned to me. You didn't win, did you? She asked. No, I said honestly. She smiled. Good. Winning makes people careless. We both knew what she meant. Ethan stayed away, He sent one text after the dust settled. "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, because the apology wasn't the point. Some things didn't need response. They needed distance. Months later, I drove back to the house by the water. It hadn't sold. The investigation had frozen everything, and in the quiet that followed, it simply remained. I opened the windows and let the air move through the rooms. I stood in the kitchen, where my parents had eaten breakfast for decades, and noticed how clean the counters were, how little had changed. I realized then that the house had never been the asset. Time had been. Time to notice. Time to act. Time to choose something harder than revenge. I did not feel triumphant standing there. I felt finished. That night, as I locked up and turned off the lights, I thought about the version of myself who had walked into that care facility weeks earlier, carrying a bag of folded clothes and believing love would be enough. She had been wrong, but she had learned. Justice, I understood now, wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It didn't always look like punishment. Sometimes, justice looked like restraint, like stepping back when you could destroy, like choosing repair over spectacle. As I drove away, the house receding in my rearview mirror, I felt something settle into place. Not peace, clarity. Everything I had believed about doing the right thing had changed. And yet, for the first time since this began, I trusted myself again. That was the part no one could take from me, and that was enough.